My 18-year-old neighbor spies on me through the fence hole every day. So I did this. I never thought something like this would happen to me. Every afternoon, like clockwork, I'd catch a glimpse of him. Those curious eyes peeking through the tiny hole in the wooden fence that separated our yards. At first I ignored it. I thought it was just coincidence. But as the days passed, the truth became impossible to deny. My 18-year-old neighbor was watching me. Every single day. Every time I stepped outside. Every time I took off my shirt to water the garden or sat by the pool with a book. I felt it. His gaze. Focused. Intent. Almost hungry for something he didn't dare ask for. And the worst part? A part of me liked it. So, what did I do when I finally realized he was doing this on purpose? What happened the day I walked right up to that fence and stared back at him through the same hole? Stay with me, because what happened next will change everything you think you know about control, temptation, and what happens when you stop pretending you don't notice. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to flip the game on someone who's been secretly watching you, you won't want to miss a second of this story. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because once you hear how far this went, you won't believe how it ends. It started small, barely noticeable really. A tiny crack in the wooden fence that separated my backyard from the house next door. I remember the first time I felt it. That strange prickling sensation along the back of my neck. Like someone's eyes were on me. Watching. Studying. At first I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just paranoia. After all, I worked from home, spent most of my afternoons out here, catching the sun or watering the plants. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to glance over every now and then. But this felt different. One Saturday afternoon, while I was lying on a lounge chair scrolling through my phone, I caught the first glimpse. A flash of brown, quick and almost imperceptible, moving behind the knothole in the fence. My heart paused for a second, then resumed, a little faster than before. I sat up and stared at the fence. The hole wasn't big, maybe the size of a coin, but it was there, right at eye level. If someone stood on the other side and leaned in close. I waited for movement. Nothing. I stood and walked toward it, pretending I was checking the plants along the fence line. As I got closer, I slowed down, making sure my footsteps didn't crunch too loudly on the gravel. When I reached the spot, I bent down and peeked. Nothing. Just an empty backyard next door. I sighed and laughed softly to myself. Maybe I was going crazy, overthinking, making up stories in my head to break the boredom. But then, the next day, it happened again. I was shirtless, pulling weeds along the fence when I felt it, that same tingle crawling over my skin. Without thinking, I glanced toward the hole. This time I saw it. A single eye, dark brown, wide and frozen, staring at me. For a second, neither of us moved. My stomach twisted into a knot. I froze mid-motion, my hand still wrapped around a handful of weeds. Slowly, too slowly. The eye blinked, then disappeared as whoever it was pulled back from the fence. I stood there, heart pounding. My first instinct was anger. Who the hell spies on their neighbor like that? But under the anger, there was something else. A flicker of curiosity. And maybe something warmer. Something I shouldn't feel. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the moment in my head. The eye. The way it lingered on me just a second too long. Who was it? I knew the family next door had a teenage son. I'd seen him around a few times, always wearing baggy hoodies, earbuds jammed in, keeping to himself. His name was Ryan, 18, if I remembered right. The realization made my heart skip. Could it really be him? The next morning, I tested a theory. I pulled on a loose pair of shorts, skipped the shirt altogether, and walked outside with a cup of coffee like it was any other day. I stood by the fence, deliberately stretching, giving the perfect view of my back and shoulders. And just like clockwork, there it was, the shadow of movement behind the wood, the faintest sound of a foot shifting on gravel. My pulse quickened. I turned, fast. I locked eyes with him, just for half a second, before he stumbled backward, knocking something over on his side of the yard. I smiled to myself. So it was Ryan. Now, the question wasn't whether he was watching me. It was how far he was willing to go, and how far I was willing to let this go on. The game had started, and tomorrow, I planned to make the next move. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I spent a little more time than usual choosing what to wear. Something casual but suggestive. A loose tank top that showed just enough of my chest and sides whenever I moved, and a pair of gym shorts that hung low on my hips. I told myself it was just to be comfortable in the summer heat, but deep down, I knew it was for him. I stepped outside like it was any other day. Coffee in hand, sunglasses on. The sun was already high, and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass from the neighbor's yard. I lingered near the fence. I pretended to inspect the flowers lining the walkway, kneeling down in just the right spot so the hole in the fence was at the perfect angle. I knew he was there. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. The stillness on the other side. That charged, electric kind of silence. I stayed there longer than necessary, pulling at the dirt with my fingers, letting the muscles in my arms flex naturally as I moved. I kept my head low, but my smile was impossible to hide. Then, a noise. The soft crunch of footsteps. I froze, my heart racing. Was he coming closer? Slowly, I lifted my gaze toward the hole. For the briefest second, I caught him. Brown eyes, flushed cheeks, a strand of dark hair falling across his forehead. Ryan. He jerked back so fast that I heard something topple over on his side of the fence again. This time it sounded like a plastic chair hitting the ground. I stood, dusting the dirt off my hands, unable to hold back the laugh rising in my throat. The game was officially on, and I was enjoying every second of it. For the rest of the day I stayed indoors, but my mind kept drifting back to him. What was going through his head? Was he embarrassed? Curious? Regretting it? Or maybe replaying the view I'd given him that morning? By late afternoon, I decided to push the line just a little further. I grabbed an old basketball from the garage and headed out to the small patch of driveway near the fence. I dribbled a few times, tossing the ball toward the hoop that hung over my garage door. The sun was hot on my skin, sweat quickly forming on my chest and neck. After a few shots, I took a break, pulling off my tank top entirely and tossing it onto the grass. Now I was shirtless, standing just feet away from the fence, fully aware that he was probably back at his usual spot. I stretched, slow, deliberate movements, letting every muscle roll beneath my skin. I ran a hand through my hair and turned, pretending to glance around casually. And that's when I saw him. Not through the hole this time, but standing in full view, right in his backyard. He froze when our eyes met, completely caught. He was holding a garden hose like he'd been pretending to water the grass, but the nozzle hung limp in his hand, forgotten. I raised an eyebrow, half challenging, half inviting. "Hey!" I called out, my voice easy, playful. His face turned crimson. Hey," he said back, almost choking on the word. For a second, neither of us moved. I could see the panic in his eyes,
like he wanted to run inside, disappear. But something kept him there, something stronger than fear. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something more. I stepped closer to the fence, resting my hand on the wood. "Looks like we finally caught each other," I said, smiling. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Before he could gather the nerve, I heard another voice from inside his house. A woman. Probably his mom. "Ryan, dinner's ready." He flinched at the sound and turned toward the door, fumbling with the hose, dropping it entirely in the rush. "Coming!" he yelled back. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the empty spot where he'd been just seconds before. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I'd pushed too far. But even as the doubt crept in, I knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to stop. The next morning, I told myself I was going to take it easy, that maybe I'd give him some space after what happened yesterday. But that lasted all of 5 minutes. As soon as I walked past the window and caught a glimpse of his bedroom curtains shifting, that familiar itch returned. The curiosity, the need to push just a little further. Around noon, I headed outside again. This time I grabbed a lawn chair and placed it right near the fence, close enough for him to hear every sound I made, every breath, every subtle movement. I stretched out, closed my eyes, and let the sun warm my skin. But I wasn't relaxed, not really. Every sense was on high alert, waiting for the smallest sign of him. And sure enough, after a few minutes, there it was. The quietest shuffle, barely audible, but it was there. I smiled to myself, then sat up, pretending to check my phone. I shifted my chair just a little closer to the fence, then reached up and pulled my tank top off again, letting it fall to the ground like it meant nothing. I tilted my head back, letting out a soft, satisfied sigh. "Hot day," I muttered loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Seconds later, I heard something I hadn't expected. His voice. "Yeah, it is." I froze. For a second, I wondered if I'd imagined it, but no. I turned my head toward the fence, and there he was, standing fully in view this time. No more hiding, no more spying through tiny holes. Ryan, wearing a fitted white t-shirt that clung to his chest in a way that told me he'd filled out more than I realized. His dark hair was messy, like he'd just rolled out of bed, and there was this nervous energy in the way he shifted from foot to foot. I blinked, unsure what to say. Before I could figure it out, he spoke again. Sorry about yesterday. Didn't mean to, you know." He trailed off, cheeks turning that same shade of pink I was starting to recognize. I decided to make it easy for him. "It's fine," I said, offering a half smile. "I figured you'd show up eventually." That got a reaction. His eyes widened and he opened his mouth like he wanted to protest, but then closed it again. He ran a hand through his hair, laughing awkwardly. "Guess I wasn't very subtle, huh?" "Not really," I said, chuckling softly. A long pause settled between us, the kind that feels both tense and electric at the same time. I could see him swallowing hard, his gaze dropping briefly to my bare chest before snapping back up. "I should probably go," he mumbled, turning to leave. But for some reason, I stood up. Without thinking, I reached over the top of the fence, grabbing his wrist just before he could step away. His skin was warm, soft but tense under my fingers. He froze. For a second, 2 seconds, 3. Neither of us moved. I felt his pulse jump beneath my touch, and I knew. This wasn't in my head. He turned slowly, his face now only inches from mine, separated only by the thin barrier of old wood and air. His breathing changed, shallow, unsteady, and then it happened. His other hand lifted toward mine. His fingers brushed over my knuckles, tentative, testing. It wasn't an accident. I knew it. He knew it. But just as quickly, he pulled away. "I really have to go," he said, voice low, almost strained. And before I could react, he was gone again, slipping inside his house, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding harder than it had in months. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he'd just been, my fingers still tingling from the way he touched me. For the first time, I wasn't sure who was chasing who anymore. And something told me, tomorrow, it was only going to get worse. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment over and over, the way his fingers had traced across mine for that single, charged second. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't him being friendly. That was something else. Something deliberate. By morning, I had made up my mind. No more games, no more pretending. If he wanted to push boundaries, I was going to meet him halfway. I headed outside earlier than usual, right after breakfast. The sky was still pale, and the air smelled like dew and cut grass. I stood by the fence again, but this time I brought my phone and a small, portable speaker. I queued up a playlist, slow, chill music, and sat cross-legged in the sun, my back resting against the wooden boards. I didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, I heard movement on the other side. But today, there was something different. Voices, not just his. Another guy, loud, laughing, joking about something I couldn't make out. I frowned and stood up, curiosity pulling me closer to the fence. Peeking through the hole, I caught sight of Ryan and another boy, tall, with short blonde hair and a cocky grin that made my stomach tighten for reasons I didn't fully understand. They were tossing a football back and forth in Ryan's backyard, both laughing like old friends. I didn't recognize the other guy. Maybe a school friend? A teammate? I stepped back, heart sinking a little. So, this is what he did when he wasn't spying on me, acting like any other 18-year-old kid, hanging out, laughing, being normal. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the jealousy sat heavy in my chest. And then, something happened that made it worse. They stopped playing. Ryan said something I couldn't hear, then pointed toward the fence, toward me. The other guy turned, grinning. Eyes narrowed like he already knew the joke. I froze. Were they talking about me? Had Ryan told him something? Shared some story about the weird older neighbor next door? My stomach twisted. I grabbed my tank top from the ground and turned to head inside. But just as I reached the back door, a football slammed into the fence with a loud, echoing thud. I whipped around. Ryan was standing there, staring at me over the fence with wide eyes. The ball had clearly slipped, or maybe it hadn't. "Sorry," he called out quickly, voice cracking just a little. "Wasn't aiming for that." The other guy burst out laughing behind him. I forced a tight smile. "No problem," I said, raising a hand. "Happens." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me with more force than necessary. My chest felt tight, conflicted. Was he messing with me now, using our little game as a joke to impress his friend? Or was this something else entirely? For the next hour, I paced inside my house, unable to focus on anything. The more I thought about it, the more it ate at me. Every glance, every word, every accidental touch from the past week. Was any of it even real? I didn't want to admit it, but I felt hurt. I walked back outside just as the sun started to dip lower in the sky. The yard was quiet now. His friend had left. The house next door looked still. And then, a voice behind me. "Hey." I turned. Ryan was standing by the fence, but not at the usual spot. He had come around to the side gate, into my yard. My heart stopped. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking anywhere but at me. "Sorry about earlier," he said softly. "That wasn't cool. I didn't want him to know. About, me watching." I stayed silent, waiting. His eyes finally met mine. "I don't usually do this," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't stop." I took a step closer, close enough to see the way his chest rose and fell a little too fast. "And now?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Now, I don't want to stop." Before I could say anything else, footsteps sounded from the front of his house. A car door slammed. His mom. "Ryan, can you help me with the groceries?" His eyes widened in panic. Without thinking, he grabbed my wrist. For a split second, his fingers tightened around mine. Then he let go and bolted for his front door, leaving me standing there breathless and more confused than ever. And as I stood there watching him disappear inside, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want him to stop either. The next 2 days were torture. I didn't see him, not once. I checked the backyard every hour like some restless teenager, hoping to catch even a glimpse of him. But the curtains in his room stayed drawn. No more movement near the fence. No soft footsteps on gravel. Nothing. The silence drove me crazy. Had I scared him off? Had that last moment, the way he grabbed my wrist, been too much for him? Or was it something else? Maybe his friend had said something. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he regretted all of it. By the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled on my sneakers, grabbed a jacket, and decided to go for a walk around the block just to clear my head. As I rounded the corner near his house, I slowed, and that's when I saw him, Ryan, sitting on the curb, head down, earbuds dangling from his hands instead of in his ears. He looked lost in thought, staring at the pavement like it had all the answers he couldn't find. For a moment, I considered walking past without saying anything, letting him have his space. But my feet had other ideas. "Hey," I said, stopping in front of him. His head jerked up so fast it startled me. His eyes widened, like seeing me here was both his worst fear and secret hope all at once. "Hey," he breathed out, voice scratchy like he hadn't used it in hours. I sat down beside him, close enough for our shoulders to almost touch. Neither of us spoke at first. The air between us felt thick, charged, dangerous. Finally, he exhaled a shaky breath. "I've been thinking," he said, staring straight ahead, "about all of this." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. I don't know why I did it at first. Watching you. I do, but... He laughed nervously, rubbing his palms against his jeans. "It was stupid and creepy. I get it if you hate me for it." I shook my head slowly. "I don't hate you," I said, my voice low. He turned, meeting my gaze fully for the first time in days. "I guess I just wanted to see you," he admitted, eyes flickering down to my mouth for the briefest second before darting away. "And then when you noticed, I didn't know how to stop." The vulnerability in his voice hit me like a punch to the chest. I swallowed hard. "Ryan?" Before I could finish, a car horn blared from the end of the street.
We both jumped, turning to see a neighbor waving from their driveway, completely unaware of the gravity of what had just been happening on the curb. Ryan stood abruptly, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "I gotta go," he mumbled. But just before he left, he turned back, and with eyes full of something between hope and terror, he whispered, "Can I see you later? Tonight?" I nodded, my heart racing. Yes. And as I watched him walk away, I realized tonight, everything was going to change. That night I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. My heart raced with every second that passed. Would he come? Would he really go through with it? Just as doubt started creeping in. A soft knock at my back door. I opened it, and there he was. Ryan stood there, hoodie pulled over his head like he was trying to hide from the world. But when he looked up at me, his eyes said everything. Without a word, I stepped aside, letting him in. The room felt smaller with him inside, warmer. For a long moment, we just stood there, face to face, hearts pounding. Then, he stepped closer. Close enough for me to feel the heat radiating off his skin. His voice shook as he whispered, "I don't want to hide anymore." And before I could respond, he leaned in, closing the space between us. Our lips met, tentative at first, but growing urgent with every second. No more guessing, no more fence between us, no more secrets, just us. Finally,